You know, Lydia was asking what you do. I was almost too embarrassed to say. My wife? Oh, she's just a secretary. God, Rosemary, all that education, and you're fetching coffee and answering phones for some middle manager. It's pathetic. Rosemary freezes, her back to him. He doesn't see the flash of steel in her eyes. He has no idea that the simple job, the company she works for, and the very chair he's sitting on, all belong to her. His world is about to shatter, and the woman he mocks is the one holding the hammer. Gregory Harris believed his life was a testament to his own brilliance. He lived in a sprawling penthouse overlooking the city, wore hand-stitched Italian suits, and drove a car that cost more than most people's homes. He was a senior vice president at Meridian Capital, a notoriously aggressive private equity firm. And he had, in his opinion, the perfect wife, Rosemary. Rosemary was quiet, beautiful, and most importantly, uncomplicated. When they met 2 years ago, she was working as a university librarian, a job he found charmingly quaint. They married in a whirlwind romance. He saw her as the perfect accessory, intelligent enough to host a dinner party, but gentle-tempered enough to never challenge his authority. Then, 6 months ago, Rosemary's father passed away. Gregory had offered his token condolences. He'd met the man, Walter Dawson, only twice. He knew Walter was in business, but he'd always assumed it was some small, old-money consulting firm. He never bothered to ask the details. He was far too busy with his own ascendant career. After the funeral, Rosemary had changed. She quit the library. Gregory assumed she was grieving, perhaps looking for a hobby job. When she told him she'd taken a position as an executive assistant at a company called Nexus Solutions, he'd laughed out loud. An assistant, he'd said, sipping his 25-year-old scotch. Honey, you don't need to work. And if you must, why not something respectable? Charity board? Art gallery? I want this, Greg, she'd said, her voice quiet. I need to feel productive. Gregory shrugged. Fine. If you want to play at being a working girl, go ahead. Just don't be late for the Bainbridge dinner on Friday. It's important for my career. What Gregory didn't know was that Nexus Solutions was not just a company. It was a mid-level tech subsidiary, one of 17 different companies held under a massive, private, multi-billion-dollar holding corporation, Vanguard Enterprises. And Walter Dawson hadn't just been in business, he had been the founder, architect, and sole owner of Vanguard. Rosemary Harris, his quiet, simple wife, had inherited all of it. For 6 months, Rosemary had lived a double life. By day she was Rose Dawson, using her maiden name, the new, efficient but overlooked assistant to a mid-level director at Nexus. She learned the systems, she listened in the break room, she saw the company from the ground up, just as her father had always advised. By night, she was Rosemary Harris, the secretary wife, enduring her husband's casual, creeping disdain. She'd done it, initially, as a test. The timing of her father's death, so close to her marriage, had unsettled her. She needed to know if Greg loved her, or the potential of the wealth he didn't even know she had. She needed to understand her father's legacy before she could lead it. But the test had begun to yield horrifying results. The man she married was transforming, or perhaps revealing himself. With every win at his own firm, his arrogance ballooned. His mockery of her little job became a daily ritual. "How was your day, honey?" he'd ask, not looking up from his phone. "Did you collate the reports? Use the right staples? God, the incompetence of the support staff at my office is staggering. No offense." "None taken," Rose would murmur, stirring the pasta. "It's just a different breed of person, you know," he'd muse, pouring himself a drink. "People like me, we build. We're predators, People like your boss, and well, you just maintain. You're the support structure. Necessary, I suppose, but not exactly inspiring. Tonight was worse. It was the anniversary of her father's death, a fact Greg had conveniently forgotten. He was too elated, buzzing from a new project at Meridian. "This is it, Rose," he announced, throwing his briefcase onto the Italian leather sofa. "Project Titan. This is the one that gets me the partnership. We're acquiring a mid-cap tech firm, over-leveraged, poorly managed. We're going to buy it for parts, streamline the redundancies, and sell the IP for a 300% profit. It's brutal, and it's beautiful." Rose felt a familiar chill. "Streamline the redundancies? What does that mean, Greg?" "It means," he said, walking over and patting her on the head like a dog, "we fire the dead weight, the assistants, the middle managers, the receptionists, the people who are just there, like your little job." He kissed her forehead, oblivious to the fact that she was shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, clarifying rage. "What's the company?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. "Oh, some little outfit. You wouldn't have heard of it," he said, walking to the bar. "It's called Nexus Solutions." Rose's grip on the wooden spoon tightened until her knuckles were white. He wasn't just insulting her job. He was actively planning to destroy it. He was planning to streamline her. And he was bragging about it to the one person who could stop him dead in his tracks. "You're right," Rosemary said, her voice a whisper. "I'm sure I haven't." He laughed, turning his back to her. "Exactly. Now, where's my dinner? I've got a conference call with Lydia in an hour. We're planning the first phase of the takeover." Rosemary watched him, the man she had promised to love. The test was over. The results were in. And Gregory Harris had just failed in the most spectacular way possible. The next morning, the elevator at Nexus Solutions felt different. The air, usually filled with stale coffee and N8 AM gloom, now felt charged with impending doom. As Rose Dawson, she entered the bullpen she shared with 4 other assistants. Her friend, Brenda, a single mother who had worked at Nexus for 15 years, was already at her desk, rubbing her temples. "Morning, Rose," Brenda sighed, not looking up from her screen. "The new coffee in the break room tastes like burnt mud. And guess what? Rumors are flying." Rose sat down, her heart heavy. "What kind of rumors?" "The big kind. The M&A kind," Brenda said, lowering her voice. "My boss, Mr. Henderson, was in a closed-door meeting all yesterday afternoon with corporate. He came out looking like he'd seen a ghost. The word is, some private equity shark is circling, and you know what that means." Rose knew exactly what it meant. It meant Gregory. It meant streamlining. "It means they're going to clean house, honey," Brenda continued, her voice trembling slightly. 15 years I've been here. My boy, his medical bills. If I lose this job..." Rose put her hand on Brenda's arm. "Hey, don't spiral. They're just rumors. You're the most efficient person in this entire department. They'd be insane to let you go." "That's sweet, Rose. But efficiency isn't what these people care about. They care about bottom lines. We're just numbers on a spreadsheet to them." "We're not just numbers," Rose thought, a fierce, protective fire lighting in her chest. "You are not a number, Brenda." For the rest of the day, Rose watched. She did her job with flawless precision, scheduling meetings, formatting reports, and fetching coffee. But she was also listening. She heard the hushed, terrified whispers by the water cooler. She saw the nervous glances managers gave each other in the hallways. She felt the palpable fear of good, hard-working people who were about to have their lives ruined by her husband's ambition. That evening, Greg came home even later than usual. He was electric, a manic energy rolling off him. "We're in!" he crowed. Not even saying hello, he ripped off his tie and threw it on the floor. We sent the preliminary offer to the parent company. They've accepted for review. They're dinosaurs, this parent company. Some old-world behemoth called Vanguard Enterprises. Their board is archaic, but they control the asset, so we have to play their game. Rose was plating his now lukewarm dinner. Vanguard? I've heard of them. Aren't they notoriously private? Exactly. No one even knows who the new owner is. The founder, Walter Dawson, died 6 months ago, and apparently left it all to, get this, his daughter. Greg let out a bark of laughter. Some poor girl who probably doesn't know a stock from a bond. She's probably already handed the keys over to the board. That's what we're counting on. A fractured, leaderless company, ripe for the picking. Rose placed the plate in front of him, her hand perfectly steady. You assume the daughter is incompetent. I assume, Greg said, taking a huge bite, that she's not me. She's not a killer. This is a man's world, Rose, especially this part of it. Project Titan is moving. Phase 1 is due diligence. Lydia and I are heading the team. We're going to go into Nexus and find every single redundancy to justify the leveraged buyout. You're going into the building? Rose's voice was faint. Yep, not me, personally, at first. We send in the auditors. But I will be meeting with the Vanguard board. I have to convince them to sell. The current offer is just a feeler. The real meeting, that's where I'll close. I'll charm that old board, and the phantom daughter, if she even bothers to show up, and I'll have them eating out of my hand. Rose looked at the man she once loved. He was so consumed by his own reflection, he couldn't see the reality inches from his face. He was hunting a ghost, all while mocking the phantom. To her face, every single night. Greg, Rose said, testing him. What about the people? Like, the assistants, the people who've been there for years. What happens to them? Greg sighed, annoyed by the interruption to his victory speech. Rose, you're so naive. That's why you're, well, you. It's a business, a machine. You have to replace the old rusty cogs. You can't get sentimental about it. It's just cost. They'll get a severance. They'll be fine. Now, can we stop talking about your work? Let's talk about mine. Rose simply nodded, clearing his empty plate. Of course, Greg. Tell me more about Project Titan. She listened for 2 more hours. She listened as he detailed his strategy. She listened as he bragged about his colleague, Lydia. She's a killer, just like me. A real shark, not soft, like you. And as she listened, Rosemary, the quiet wife, faded away. In her place, Ms. Dawson, the chairwoman of Vanguard Enterprises, was taking notes. She wasn't just going to stop the deal. She was going to dismantle the man who had so casually decided to destroy the lives of her employees, all while sleeping in her bed. The game was on. The pressure at Nexus Solutions became unbearable. Greg's auditors arrived, a team of stone-faced young men and women from Meridian Capital who set up in a conference room and began demanding files, performance reviews, and efficiency reports. Panic swept the floor. Brenda was a nervous wreck. They asked for my last 3 performance reviews, she whispered to Rose during a frantic coffee run. And they wanted to know my secondary and tertiary functions. What does that even mean? I'm a secretary, not a multitasking robot. It means they're looking for reasons to make your role redundant, Rose said grimly, handing Brenda a cup. I can't lose this job, Rose. I really can't. Rose's heart ached for her friend. That night, she made a decision. Her double life was no longer just about her and Greg. It was about Brenda and the hundreds of other employees at Nexus. She couldn't act as the chairwoman yet. That would show her hand too early. But Rose Dawson, the efficient assistant, could still do some digging. She accidentally delivered the wrong stack of files to the auditor's conference room. While they were distracted, she caught a glimpse of their internal project whiteboard. It was a list of names, department heads, managers, and under the admin heading, she saw it. Brenda K. Redundant. Severance package B. Bile rose in her throat. They had already decided. When she got home, the penthouse was empty. Greg wasn't back. This was becoming common. His late nights for Project Titan now stretched past midnight. A knot of a new, colder suspicion was forming in Rose's stomach. It wasn't just his arrogance. It was the way he mentioned his colleague. Lydia. Lydia thinks. Lydia and I closed. Lydia is a killer, just like me. Rose walked into their shared home office. Greg's laptop was on the desk, humming softly. He, in his supreme arrogance, had never bothered to password protect it from her. He thought her too simple to even know how to use it. She sat down. Her hands were shaking. This felt like a violation. But then she remembered Brenda's name on that whiteboard. He had violated his vows of marriage, and his company was violating its duty to its people. She opened his email. It didn't take long. His inbox was filled with threads about Project Titan. But there was one folder, simply labeled L. She clicked it. The emails were not just professional. They started months ago. Casual, then flirty, then explicit. They weren't just colleagues. They were lovers. Rose scrolled, her vision blurring with tears of pure, unadulterated fury. She saw emails discussing the takeover, but they were intertwined with their personal plans. From Lydia Vance. To Gregory Harris. Subject, RE, Titan projections. And after we gut Nexus, we can use the bonus to finally take that trip to Monaco. Just the two of us. I can't wait to have you all to myself, away from her. Does she still like her little secretary job? It's so pathetically funny. Rose felt the air leave her lungs. Pathetically funny. She scrolled further. She found hotel receipts, listed as client entertainment. She found dinner reservations for two at places Greg had claimed he was taking the team. And then she found the most recent one. From Gregory Harris. To Lydia Vance. Subject, the final push. Just one more hurdle, L, the Vanguard meeting. I've got to sell the deal to their ancient board. That old fossil, Robert Coleman, is the gatekeeper. Once I get past him, and the mysterious heiress signs off, we're home free. Nexus is ours. The partnership is mine. And I'm finally free. I'm tired of playing the dutiful husband to a simpleton. A simpleton. Rose closed the laptop. The quiet clicking sound was like a gunshot in the silent apartment. The hurt was deep, a physical ache in her chest. But it was being rapidly replaced by something else. Something cold and hard as diamond. She had been a fool. She had been testing a marriage that was already a lie. He wasn't just arrogant. He was unfaithful. He wasn't just ambitious. He was cruel. He and Lydia Vance were planning to liquidate her father's legacy, fire her employees, and use the profits to run away together, all while mocking her. Rosemary Harris, the heartbroken wife, walked into the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. When she looked up, it was Ms. Rosemary Dawson in the mirror. A simpleton, she whispered to her reflection. An old fossil. A mysterious heiress. She straightened her shoulders. All right, Greg, she said, her voice devoid of all its former softness. You want to meet the heiress. You'll get your meeting. You want to impress the board? You'd better be ready. You want to get past Mr. Coleman? He's the least of your problems." She left the penthouse. She didn't pack a bag. She simply walked out. She took a taxi to the Vanguard corporate suite at the Regis Hotel, a place she had kept on permanent retainer. She opened her secure laptop, the one Greg didn't know existed. She made one phone call. "Robert?" she said. A warm, older voice answered. "Ms. Dawson, I was wondering when you'd call. He's made his move, Robert. Meridian Capital, Gregory Harris. I've seen the offer. It's insulting." "It's more than that," Rose said, looking out the hotel window at the city. "It's personal. They've scheduled the meeting with you, correct? Next Tuesday. Mr. Harris and a Ms. Lydia Vance." "Good," Rose said. "I want you to be as difficult as possible. Ask him about the human cost. Ask him about the long-term plan. Let him dig his own grave." "And the final board presentation?" Robert asked. "That," Rose said, a thin, dangerous smile playing on her lips, "is when I'll be formally introducing myself. Please make sure the main boardroom at the tower is prepared. I want to see their faces." Robert Coleman was the COO of Vanguard Enterprises and had been Walter Dawson's best friend for 40 years. He was a tall, impeccably dressed man in his late 60s, with a mind like a steel trap and a deep-seated loyalty to Walter's legacy and to Walter's daughter. He regarded Project Titan as a hostile invasion, and Gregory Harris as a particularly loathsome insect. Greg and Lydia, however, walked into the Vanguard preliminary meeting room with the swagger of conquerors. They saw Robert Coleman, with his grey hair and conservatively tailored suit, and dismissed him instantly. Old fossil. "Mr. Coleman," Greg said, shaking his hand with a little too much force. "Gregory Harris, Meridian. This is my colleague, Lydia Vance. We're thrilled to finally put a face to the name." "Likewise," Robert said, his face impassive. He did not smile. "Please sit. I have reviewed your preliminary offer for Nexus Solutions." "It's a strong offer, Robert." "May I call you Robert?" Greg said, leaning forward. "Very strong. We're offering 30% above market value. It's a quick, clean, all-cash deal. You offload an underperforming asset, and we take it off your hands. Everyone wins." Lydia chimed in, her voice smooth as silk. "What Gregory means, Robert, is that we see potential in Nexus that is currently untapped. We believe with our management, we can unlock significant value." Robert steepled his fingers. "Unlock value." A popular phrase. In my experience, it's often a euphemism for liquidation and mass layoffs. Your proposal is rather thin on your plans for the existing staff. Nexus employs over 800 people. Greg and Lydia shared a quick, amused glance. "He's a sentimentalist." "Robert," Greg said, adopting a patronizing tone, "you've been in this business a long time. You know that to make an omelette, you have to break a few eggs. Synergy requires streamlining. It's just simple math. The staffing overhead at Nexus is bloated. We'd be cutting that fat, yes, but the result would be a healthier, more profitable entity." "And the fat?" Robert asked, his eyes never leaving Greg's. "What about someone like Brenda Kosloff in administration? 15 years with the company. Single mother, 2 children, one with significant medical needs. Is she fat, Mr. Harris?" Greg was taken aback. He didn't expect the COO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation to know an assistant's name. I'm not familiar with individual assistants," Greg stammered, regaining his composure. "But our models are impartial. They identify redundancies. If Brenda is redundant, then she will be handled respectfully. A severance. Package B, I believe." "Package B," Robert repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. 4 weeks' pay for 15 years of loyalty. How generous. Lydia, seeing Greg falter, jumped in. Mr. Coleman, with respect, Meridian Capital is not a charity. We are a business. We are offering Vanguard a significant immediate cash injection. Surely the personal details of a few secretaries are not relevant to a deal of this magnitude. Robert Coleman let the silence stretch. He looked from Lydia's cold, ambitious face to Greg's arrogant one. He knew, from Rose, exactly who these two were. He knew they were lovers. He knew they were planning to gut this company and toast their victory in Monaco. On the contrary, Miss Vance, Robert said finally, at Vanguard Enterprises, the personal details are the only thing relevant. My predecessor, Mr. Dawson, built this company on a single principle, that our people are the asset, not fat, not overhead, not redundancies. It seems you and Meridian Capital have a fundamentally different philosophy. Greg felt a prickle of sweat on his neck. This wasn't going as planned. The old fossil had teeth. Robert, let's be frank, Greg tried, shifting to a man-to-man tone. This is a big payday for Vanguard. Don't let sentimentality get in the way of a 9-figure deal. We just need board approval. We just need the owner's signature. We're prepared to present our full proposal to the board and to Ms. Dawson at your convenience. Robert stood up, a clear dismissal. The chairwoman is, as you noted, very private. She does not waste her time. She has, however, agreed to be present for your final presentation. 1 week from today, 10 a.m., the main boardroom at Vanguard Tower. Greg and Lydia stood, a little stunned. That's it? Lydia asked. That's it, Robert said. Your proposal, as it stands, is lacking. You are selling profit, but you haven't demonstrated value. You have 1 week, Mr. Harris, to fix that. The chairwoman is not sentimental, but she is, shall we say, meticulous. She detests fat even more than you do, but she is very, very particular about how she defines it. Robert smiled, a thin, chilling expression. I will see you both next week. Do try to be prepared. Greg and Lydia walked out of the office, their confidence rattled. What the hell was that? Lydia hissed in the elevator. He's a dinosaur, Greg. He's a dinosaur with the owner's ear, Greg snapped back. He's trying to guard his precious little kingdom. He named a secretary. Who does that? He's just posturing, Lydia said, straightening her jacket. He's trying to scare us into upping the offer. It doesn't matter. He said the heiress will be there. She's the one we have to convince. She's the one who wants the easy money. She won't care about some Brenda. You're right, Greg said, his confidence returning. He's a gatekeeper, and we just got the key. 1 week. We'll polish the pitch, flatter the heiress, and this will be over. That night, Greg went home to the dark, empty penthouse. He was annoyed. Rose wasn't there. For the last 2 days, she'd been absent. He'd found a note on the fridge. Greg, staying with my mother for a few days. Feeling overwhelmed. Need space. Unbelievable, Greg muttered, crumpling the note. She picks now to be overwhelmed. Her one job is to support me. Project Titan is on the line, and she runs off to her mother's. So, pathetic. Just like a simple secretary. He poured himself a large scotch, dialed Lydia's number, and got to work. He never once considered that the overwhelmed wife and the meticulous heiress were one and the same. The lobby of Vanguard Tower was designed to intimidate. It was a 3-story atrium of glass, steel, and stark white marble. The silence was absolute, broken only by the quiet echo of expensive shoes. Gregory Harris and Lydia Vance, despite their designer clothes and inflated egos, felt small. They were in their power uniforms, Greg in a navy power suit with a blood-red tie, Lydia in a severe black sheath dress. They had rehearsed their presentation for 72 hours straight. They had models, charts, and projections. They were ready for war. "This is it," Greg muttered to Lydia, adjusting his cuffs. 45th floor, the main boardroom. "Just stick to the script," Lydia said, her voice tight. "We flatter the board. We focus on the profit. We marginalize the human cost, just like we planned. And we charm the pants off the heiress. We'll be out of here by noon with a yes." A silent security guard motioned them to a private elevator. The ride up was silent. Greg's heart was pounding. This was the biggest deal of his life. The partnership, Monaco, the new life with Lydia. It was all behind this one door. The elevator doors opened onto the 45th floor. It was even more austere than the lobby. The walls were panelled in dark, rich mahogany, and the floor was covered in a rug so thick it absorbed all sound. Robert Coleman was waiting for them. "Mr. Harris, Miss Vance." "Welcome," Robert said, his face unreadable. "The board is ready for you." He led them down a short hallway and pushed open 2 massive, 10-foot-tall wooden doors, revealing the boardroom. It was a cavern. One entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling window, offering a staggering 180-degree view of the entire city. A colossal, polished black granite table dominated the room, surrounded by 20 high-backed leather chairs. Most of those chairs were already full. Seated around the table was the Vanguard Board of Directors. It was not the collection of old fossils Greg had anticipated. There were sharp-looking men and women in their 40s, a distinguished older gentleman who Greg recognized as a former state senator, and a tech billionaire he'd only seen on magazine covers. They all stopped their quiet conversations and turned, in unison, to look at the newcomers. Greg felt his practiced smile freeze. This was not a fractured, leaderless company. This was a fortress. "You may set up at the end of the table," Robert said, gesturing. Greg and Lydia walked the long, green mile to the presentation area, their footsteps loud in the heavy silence. They plugged in their laptop, their hands fumbling slightly. "Good morning," Greg began, his voice sounding thin. "I am Gregory Harris, and this is Lydia Vance. We're here on behalf of Meridian Capital to discuss the incredible, synergistic opportunity of acquiring Nexus Solutions." The board members just watched. No one smiled. No one nodded. Greg cleared his throat and launched into the pitch. He talked about market inefficiencies. He talked about leveraging IP. He talked about cost-saving measures and immediate ROI. He and Lydia performed their script perfectly, a slick, rehearsed duet of corporate jargon. After 20 minutes, Greg paused for breath. "And that," he said, with a flourish, "is why we believe our offer is not just generous, but the right move for Vanguard's future." A long, excruciating silence followed. Finally, the former senator spoke. "Your cost-saving measures, Mr. Harris, they involve a 40% reduction in staff, correct?" "A 40% realignment, sir," Lydia corrected smoothly, "to bring the company to peak operational efficiency." "I see," the senator said, and made a note. "And you have no plans to invest in the Nexus infrastructure?" the tech billionaire asked. "Your plan seems to be a simple strip and sell of their existing patents." "We believe the patents are the core asset," Greg said. "The infrastructure is secondary." The air in the room was cold. Greg was failing. He could feel it. He'd misread the room entirely. These people weren't dinosaurs. They were sharks, and they smelled blood. He needed an ally. He needed the heiress. "Excuse me," Greg said, trying a different tack. "Mr. Coleman, you had mentioned that the chairwoman, Ms. Dawson, would be present. We'd love to address her directly, if she's here." Robert Coleman, who had been standing quietly by the door, nodded. "You are correct, Mr. Harris. The chairwoman has been here for your entire presentation." Greg and Lydia looked around, confused. They scanned the faces again. They were all board members they recognized. Where was she? I'm sorry, I don't see," Greg began. "Ah," Robert said. "That is because she was delayed in traffic. She just arrived." Greg felt a wave of relief. A new face. A fresh start. This was his chance. "She asked me to begin without her, but to pause for her arrival," Robert continued. "She has been personally reviewing the Nexus asset for the last 6 months. She has very strong opinions on this deal." The massive boardroom doors at the far end of the hall opened with a quiet click. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert Coleman said, his voice ringing with a new, profound authority. "May I present the majority stakeholder and chairwoman of the board of Vanguard Enterprises, Ms. Rosemary Dawson." Greg and Lydia turned, broad, fake smiles plastered on their faces, ready to charm the simple heiress. A woman stepped into the room. The first thing Greg noticed was the sound of her heels on the granite floor. Click, click, click. It was a sharp, confident, commanding sound. She wasn't an old woman. She wasn't a flustered girl. She was wearing a bespoke, midnight blue Armani Privé suit that fit her like a glove. Her hair, which he was used to seeing in a simple soft ponytail, was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. Her face, which he was used to seeing look up at him with gentle deference, was set in a mask of cold, powerful indifference. It was his wife. Greg's smile didn't just fade, it shattered. His mouth fell open. The color drained from his face, leaving him a sickly, pale white. He made a small gasping sound, like a fish pulled from water. Lydia, who had only seen pictures of Rosemary, didn't recognize her. She just saw a powerful woman. She nudged Greg. "Greg, that's her. Pull it together." But Greg couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. Rosemary didn't look at him. She didn't look at Lydia. She walked with terrifying, unhurried poise to the empty chair at the absolute head of the table. She sat, and the entire board turned to her. She placed her leather-bound portfolio on the table. She opened it. She looked up and finally, her eyes swept over Greg and Lydia. Greg's entire world tilted on its axis. The woman he mocked, the simpleton, the secretary. She was staring at him from the head of a multi-billion-dollar boardroom, and she was not smiling. The silence in the boardroom was no longer just heavy, it was suffocating. Lydia Vance, sensing the catastrophic shift in Greg's demeanor, stared in confusion. "Greg, what is it? What's wrong?" Greg's hands were shaking so violently he knocked over his glass of water. It spread across the polished table like a dark, growing stain. He just stared, his eyes wide with a dawning, unimaginable horror. "Rose," he whispered. The name was a dry croak. "Rose. Honey. What? What is this? Is this a joke? Are you taking notes for Mr. Coleman?" The board members all turned to look at Greg, their expressions ranging from pity to pure contempt. Rosemary let his pathetic question hang in the air. She looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time in 6 months. She saw a weak, terrified man, hollowed out by his own greed. She leaned forward, her voice calm, clear, and cutting. It was a voice he had never heard. It didn't ask. It commanded. "Mr. Harris," she said. The formal address hit him like a physical slap. "I am not your honey," Rosemary continued, her voice amplified by the room's acoustics. "I am not taking notes, and I am not just a secretary. My name is Rosemary Dawson, and you are in my boardroom, at my table, attempting to sell me a plan to dismember my company." Lydia Vance's perfectly made-up face went completely white. She looked at Greg, then at Rosemary, then back at Greg. The simpleton wife? This was the wife? The heiress? The owner? "Oh, my God," Lydia breathed, stumbling back a step. "I believe you two know each other," Robert Coleman said dryly from the doorway. "Rosemary, please," Greg stammered, his mind blue-screening, desperately trying to compute. "I don't understand. You work at Nexus. You're an assistant. I—" "Yes, I am," Rose said. "For 6 months, I have been Rose Dawson, executive assistant. I've been fetching coffee. I've been scheduling meetings. I've been logging your auditor's requests. I've been listening in the break room. And I've been listening at home." She turned her icy gaze on Lydia, who looked like she was about to be physically ill. "Miss Vance, a pleasure to finally meet you in person. I've read so much of your work." Lydia's blood ran cold. "I've read your synergy proposals," Rose continued, tapping a thick binder in front of her. "Your plan to streamline the dead weight. People like Brenda Kosloff, an employee I've had the pleasure of working with. A woman who you, in your impartial model, deemed redundant. You plan to fire her with 4 weeks' pay. A woman who has given this company 15 years of her life. Ms. Dawson, that's just a projection." Lydia fumbled, her slick professionalism evaporating. "And I've read your other correspondence," Rose said, her voice dropping, and now it was personal. Greg visibly flinched. Oh no. Rose met Lydia's terrified eyes. "Your plans for Monaco. Your opinion of my pathetically funny little job. Your impatience with having to wait for me. Her to be out of the picture." Lydia Vance, the killer, the shark, looked at Greg in pure panic. He had promised her the wife was a non-entity. The non-entity was now sitting at the head of the table, holding the strings to their entire lives. "And you," Rose said, her attention finally snapping back to her husband. Greg looked like a man about to face a firing squad. "You, the predator, the builder, the man who was tired of playing dutiful husband to a simpleton." Every word was a nail in his coffin. "Rose, no, listen to me," Greg begged, taking a step forward. "You don't understand. I knew you were special. I was testing you." The sheer, pathetic desperation of the lie made even the board members wince. Rose held up a single elegant hand. "Silence. Mr. Harris, your Project Titan is dead. Meridian Capital's offer is not just rejected. It is an insult to my father's legacy and to every employee at this company. You are done here." No. "Rosemary, please." Greg was crying now, his face crumpled and ugly. "Our marriage, I love you. I love you, Rose." "You loved the idea of me," Rose said, her voice filled with a sudden, weary finality. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, surgical precision. "You loved a prop, a quiet, uncomplicated accessory who ironed your shirts and wouldn't challenge your fragile ego. You didn't love me. You didn't even know me." She stood up. The entire board stood with her. "You mocked my work. You planned to destroy the livelihoods of hundreds of people. You betrayed me in my home. And you did it all with my money." Greg's head snapped up. What? "The penthouse, Greg," Rose said, walking around the table toward him. He cowered as she approached. "Did you think you could afford that on a VP's salary? My father bought that apartment in cash as a wedding gift. It is a Vanguard corporate property. The car you drive, it's leased by my holding company. The club you belong to, my father was a founding member. The entire life you thought you built, it was mine. You were just living in it. Greg's legs gave out. He literally staggered, catching himself on the back of a chair. He had built nothing. He was nothing. He was the support staff he so despised. "You are not a predator, Greg," Rose said, stopping a foot from him. "You're a parasite." She looked past him, to Lydia, who was frozen by the door. "Miss Vance, I believe your own company, Meridian Capital, has a rather strict morals clause in its executive contracts. I imagine they also frown on inappropriate relations that jeopardize 9-figure deals. Mr. Coleman has already forwarded your emails, your hotel receipts, and the minutes of this meeting to your CEO, Mr. Powell. I doubt you'll have a job by the time you get back to your office." Lydia let out a choked sob, grabbed her portfolio, and fled the room. Now it was just Greg, alone, humiliated, destroyed. "Rosemary, what do I do?" he whimpered. Rose looked at him, not with hatred, but with a profound, empty indifference. "Security will escort you from the building, Mr. Harris," she said, turning her back on him. "My lawyer will be in touch. He will be serving you divorce papers at the apartment. You have 24 hours to collect your personal belongings, which I imagine won't take very long." She walked toward the door, where Robert Coleman was holding it open for her. "Rose, please, don't do this," Greg screamed, a raw, desperate sound. Rose paused in the doorway, but she didn't turn around. "It's already done. You just didn't know it. You were right about one thing, Greg. It is pathetic that you were married to the owner of the company and were too arrogant to ever see it." She walked out. The two massive doors swung shut with a quiet, final thud, leaving Gregory Harris alone in the silent, cavernous room, his entire world gone. The world was muffled, as if Gregory Harris were underwater. The sound of the massive boardroom doors clicking shut behind him was the last clear thing he heard. After that, it was a blur. 2 security guards, built like refrigerators and dressed in the same severe, dark suits as the Vanguard board, appeared at his side. They didn't touch him, not at first. They simply flanked him, their presence a silent, undeniable force, guiding him back toward the elevator. He moved, but his legs felt like they belonged to someone else. He saw the mahogany walls, the thick carpet, the silent ride down in the glass elevator, but it was like watching a movie of his own life. He was a ghost. The city spread out below him as the elevator descended, a glittering prize he could no longer touch. He stumbled out into the 3-story marble lobby. The sunlight was painfully bright. He was on the sidewalk before he even realized his feet were moving. The sounds of the city rushed in, car horns, a distant siren, the chatter of people walking by. They were all so alive. And he was finished. His phone began to vibrate in his pocket. It buzzed, a frantic, angry insect. He fumbled for it, his hand still shaking. The screen read, "CEO. Powell," he answered, a desperate, last-ditch hope flickering. Maybe he could spin this. Maybe he could explain. "Sir, please listen." "Harris." The voice on the other end was a roar, so loud it distorted the speaker. "What in the hell did you do? I just got a call from Robert Coleman at Vanguard. The deal is dead. He said it was rejected with extreme prejudice. And I just got a package from their legal department. Emails, Harris, hotel receipts. You were sleeping with Vance? You were sleeping with your colleague on a hostile takeover bid." "Sir, it's not what it looks like," Greg babbled, pacing frantically on the sidewalk, people swerving to avoid him. "It's exactly what it looks like. You were insulting the owner? The owner was your wife? Are you clinically insane?" Powell screamed. "You didn't just jeopardize a 9-figure deal. You humiliated this firm. You made us look like amateurs. You're fired, Greg. You're finished. Our lawyers will be in touch about the non-compete, and you can guarantee we will be clawing back every cent of your last bonus. You are a pariah, Harris. You'll never work in this city again." The line clicked dead. Greg stared at the phone. Fired. Finished. Pariah. He tried Lydia. His hands were trembling so badly he misdialed twice. On the third try, it connected. A cold, automated voice answered. "The number you have dialed has been disconnected or is no longer in service." Of course, she was a killer, a shark. She'd cut her losses and run, just as he would have done. Their alliance, built on shared greed and betrayal, had shattered the moment it was no longer profitable. A cold fear, sharper than the autumn wind, cut through his shock. Money. He pulled out his wallet, his corporate Amex, his corporate Visa. He ran to the corner ATM, jamming the Amex in. Card invalid. "Please contact your issuer." He tried the Visa. Card declined. They hadn't waited. Meridian had already frozen his accounts. He was standing on a street corner in a $5,000 suit, with maybe $80 in cash in his pocket. The penthouse. He couldn't think. He just had to get home. Home to Rose. He could fix this. He could apologize. He could beg. He was good at selling. He could sell this. He flagged a taxi, his arm waving wildly. He gave the address, his voice cracking. The driver eyed him in the rearview mirror, this wild-eyed man in a power suit. He arrived at the gleaming tower, his home. He ran through the revolving doors into the lobby that smelled of faint gardenias and old money. Frank, the doorman who had greeted him with a fawning, "Good afternoon, Mr. Harris, for 2 years, stepped in front of him, his face a mask of professional regret. "Sir, I'm afraid I can't let you up." "Frank, what are you talking about? It's me," Greg yelled, his voice echoing in the quiet lobby. "I live here. Get out of my way." "I'm sorry, sir," Frank said, his voice firm. "My instructions are very clear. You are no longer on the resident list. We've been asked to deny you entry." You can't do this. My things are up there. My clothes. My life." "A building manager is packing your personal effects as we speak," Frank said, reciting a line he had clearly been fed. "They will be delivered to a secure storage facility. Your lawyer, or a representative, can arrange for their retrieval." His lawyer. He didn't have a lawyer. Meridian's lawyers were coming for him. "Please, Frank," Greg whispered, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a vast, cold emptiness. "Just let me go up. Just for a minute." Frank shook his head, his eyes full of something Greg had never seen from him. Pity. "I can't, sir. I'll lose my job. They're very serious." Greg backed away, stumbling out the revolving doors. He stood on the curb, looking at the taxi he hadn't paid. The driver was already yelling at him. He threw his last $80 through the window and sank onto a granite bench across the street. He stared up at the wall of windows, at the 34th floor penthouse. His penthouse. No. Her penthouse. It had always been hers. The car, his beautiful midnight blue sports car, was gone from its reserved spot out front. Of course, leased by Vanguard. He had built nothing. He was nothing. He had been a pet, living in a gilded cage, and he'd been too arrogant to even see the bars. He looked down at the watch on his wrist. A Patek Philippe, a congratulations on the wedding gift. From his simpleton wife. It felt suddenly heavy, hot, like a manacle. With a raw scream that was half sob, half rage, he unclasped it and threw it with all his might into the street. It skittered across the asphalt and disappeared down a storm drain. Weeks later, the atmosphere at Nexus Solutions was electric. Rosemary Dawson, now Ms. Dawson, to all, had called an all-hands meeting in the company cafeteria. The room was packed, people lining the walls, the air thick with nervous anticipation. She stepped onto the small stage, dressed not in the intimidating armor of the boardroom, but in simple, professional trousers and a silk blouse. She looked like Rose, but she also looked like the leader they had never known they had. "Good morning, everyone," she said. Her voice, unamplified, carried through the hushed room. "I know the last few weeks have been stressful. You've all been living under the shadow of a takeover. Rumors, auditors, fear. I'm here to tell you that the threat is over. Vanguard is not selling Nexus solutions." A wave of stunned silence was broken by a single person clapping, then another. Then the entire room erupted in applause, cheers and open, relieved sobs. Rosemary held up a hand, smiling warmly. "But more than that," she continued, "I'm here to apologize. My father, Walter Dawson, built Vanguard on a single principle, that our people are the asset. Somewhere along the way, our corporate leadership, I lost sight of that. I've spent the last 6 months working alongside you. I've fetched your coffee, I've collated your reports, and I've seen your talent, your dedication, and your fear. That ends today." She looked out and found a face in the crowd. "Brenda Kosloff, would you please come up here?" Brenda, who was standing near the back, looked around, thinking she'd misheard. People gently pushed her forward. She walked up to the stage, her hands shaking, her face pale. "Brenda is one of the most dedicated, efficient, and compassionate employees I have ever met," Rose announced, her voice ringing with conviction. "And it is a criminal failure of our management that she was ever made to feel redundant. She was the first person to show me kindness here. She, and many of you, are the heart of this company." She turned to Brenda. "So, effective immediately, I am creating a new position. Brenda is our new Director of Employee Relations, reporting directly to me. Her first task," Rose said, turning back to the crowd, "is to conduct a full review of our salary, benefits, and healthcare packages, to ensure that no one who gives their life to this company ever has to worry about their child's medical bills again." Brenda burst into tears, a raw, shocked sound of disbelief and gratitude. Rose hugged her as the entire cafeteria leaped to its feet in a standing ovation that went on for a full minute. Rose went on to announce a new 10% company-wide raise, a new investment in R&D, and a profit-sharing initiative. She wasn't liquidating the company. She was investing in it. She was honoring her father's legacy. Later that week, Rose was in her new office, the one that used to belong to the Nexus director she'd assisted. Robert Coleman stopped by, a thin leather portfolio in his hand. "The divorce is finalized, Miss Dawson," he said quietly. "Thank you, Robert." Mr. Harris's lawyers, what little was left of them, tried to contest the prenuptial agreement. They failed, spectacularly. Your father was, as in all things, meticulous. Mr. Harris signed away any and all claims to the Vanguard estate and all related assets. Robert placed a single piece of paper on her desk. He is, however, requesting alimony. Rose looked at the paper, at the desperate, baseless claim from the man who had mocked her for having a job. A small, sad smile touched her lips. She picked up a pen and signed the denied box with a firm, black signature. "Mr. Harris seems to have forgotten," she said, sliding the paper back to Robert. "I'm not sentimental, and I detest fat." Robert smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "Indeed, ma'am, he signed his rights away to a simpleton. He never read the fine print." "And Mr. Harris?" she asked, not out of concern, but out of a need for final closure. "What's become of him?" From what our associates can tell, Robert said, closing his portfolio, he is struggling. He's been blacklisted by every major firm in the city. The story of what happened in your boardroom, it's become something of a legend. No one will touch him. He's living in a short-term rental in a less than desirable part of town. His suits are in hock. He's apparently been applying for entry-level analyst jobs at temp agencies. Rose nodded once. Karma. Now, Robert, let's talk about the new healthcare plan. I want it to be the best in the industry. Far across town, in a windowless, fluorescent-lit office smelling of burnt coffee and dust, a man named Greg sat staring at a spreadsheet. The cubicle walls were a depressing shade of beige. His suit was rumpled and shiny at the elbows. His face was gaunt. He was doing data entry. It was mindless, soulless, soul-crushing work. A younger man, a shift supervisor with a cheap tie and a power trip, dropped a towering stack of papers on his desk. "Hey, Greg!" the supervisor sneered, mimicking a boss. "Need you to collate these reports, and use the right staples this time. We had to redo your last batch. Then, go get me a coffee. Black. 2 sugars." Greg just stared at the wall, his hands frozen on the keyboard. He was, finally and truly, just a secretary. And so, the man who believed he was a predator learned, in the most humiliating way possible, that he was nothing more than prey. Gregory Harris's arrogance was his downfall. He was so blinded by his own reflection that he couldn't see the lioness standing right next to him. He didn't just lose his job or his marriage, he lost the entire world he had built on a foundation of lies and disdain. Rosemary Dawson, on the other hand, proved that true power isn't loud. It isn't arrogant. True power is quiet, it's observant, and it's rooted in respect. She didn't just save her company, she rebuilt it, honoring the people her husband had dismissed as fat. What do you think of this story of karma? Have you ever seen someone underestimate a quiet person, only to find out they were the one in charge? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you loved this story, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and make sure you subscribe to the channel for more true-life dramatic stories every single week. We appreciate your support more than you know.